Hello and welcome back to another Maya tutorial. This time we're looking at splitting objects and detaching their components to turn one object or one mesh into multiple smaller and simpler objects. And that can make it easier to manage with materials, UV mapping and texturing. So I've got these two pillars here. They're both identical, and if we look in the outliner you can see they are just single objects and they're just titled Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. Now the first way I can do this is to go into Edge mode, so right click, go into Edge mode, and I want to split this up into 5 sections. And if we look at this object, we have 2 steps or 2 levels at the bottom, the main cylinder in the middle, and then another 2 steps at the top, so 5 different parts. And all we need to do is select all the edges between these parts. And we can either select one edge, hold shift and then select the others, or if it's a continuous edge that loops around your object, we can just double click and it will select all the way around. To help, we can press 4 to go into wireframe, and you can see that that selection does go all the way around the object. 5 to go back to shaded, and then hold shift and select all the other parts or in between the other parts where you want to split this up. So we can now go towards the top of the object and we can make some more selections. Hold shift, double click, or hold shift and select several. And now all we need to do is go up to edit mesh and then detach. And you don't have to do this in one go. You can detach several times and you can split objects several times. Once you've detached everything, right click and go back to object mode, and you'll see it's still one object at the moment. And if we look at the outliner, it's still one object here. Next we have to go to mesh and then separate, and it will separate around where we actually had these selections. So now we have 5 different objects. If we zoom in closer, we can select all of these. You can move them around, we can add materials, UV map and texture these independently now. And if we look at the outliner, we still have something called Pillar 1, but it's now a group. And we can select the entire group. We can move, scale and rotate the group together. And if we expand this group by clicking on the plus in the outliner, we can access all the individual components. And you can retitle these in the usual way, just double click and give these a new name if you need to. And you will notice, because Maya has a history, it remembers everything you've done, we have this transform inside the group. Now if you don't want that, or if it's causing problems, we can delete the history. So go up to edit, delete by type. History will work on only objects currently selected, or delete all by type. History will work on everything in your scene. So I'll go to delete all by type history, and that removes that transform inside the group. We can still access the group and the individual components. One other way to do this, if you find it difficult to select all the edges, or if the edges don't loop around your object, is to select the faces. So on another object exactly the same, we can right click, go to face mode, and I could make some selections of just faces. So I could select 1/4 of this object. And the parts you select are entirely up to you. You just need to think ahead about which areas you want to split up to make it easier to texture. And I'll just press 4 to make sure I've got the right parts selected there. There's no additional areas, so I'm happy with that. 5 to go back to shaded, and then we can do the same process again. Go up to edit mesh, detach, go back to object mode, select your object, then mesh and separate. And now we can select these areas independently. We can even move them away. So if I go to my move tool, I can move that whole section away. Something else you'll find that happens when we do this is the transformations, the attributes that are in our channel box actually become frozen. They reset to 0 as soon as we detach and separate the mesh. And that can be really useful. So if we do move this particular piece away, if it becomes rotated or just in a different part of our scene, if we want to put it back, rather than manually moving that, and that can be quite tricky to get it exactly right, we can just type in zeros in our channel box. So whichever numbers you've changed, or whichever numbers are no longer zero except for scale, we can just type zeros there, and that puts it back exactly where it was. Okay, so practice this. You can make selections with edges or faces. Think ahead about how you might want to try and lay out your UV map, and have a look at my UV mapping tutorials to help.